Thor. You know,
God of Thunder, strongest Avenger.
that's what you know him as. But the real Thor was actually a chubby redhead with anger management issues that could not fly, but instead rode around on a chariot drawn by two goats called Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder. Mans was on the Santa Claus thing for real. Also, you know the giants from Norse mythology that are evil and the enemies of the gods? They are called Jötnar, and Thor is actually 3/4 Jötnar and only 1/4 Aesir god because Thor's mother was a Jötnar that Odin cheated on his wife with. Yeah, they don't tell you that in the usual mythology stories, but that's why I'm here today and why I call this episode Note that there are some extra facts about Thor at the end of the video that didn't really fit the flow of my storytelling, but I want to include them for completion's sake, so watch until the end to get everything there is to know about Thor. The fact that Thor is 3/4 Jötnar makes it even more messed up that he made it his mission to single-handedly genocide the Jötnar race. No one in Norse mythology has killed more Jötun than Thor, and that's tragically ironic because it's thanks to his Jötun blood that Thor is even that strong, physically stronger than every other god, including Odin. And if you've been keeping up with the math, Thor being 3/4 Jötun means that yes, his father, Odin, has to be half Jötun himself. That's the intro done. Now let's first talk about Thor's hammer and then we'll talk about Mjolnir. Get it? That was a good one. Might take a while, but when you get it, you're like, oh, damn, that's funny. Hammer, Mjolnir, you get it. Alright, I'm gonna skip straight to grown Thor because there isn't really much about childhood Thor. It's even hotly debated who Thor's mother really is. We just know that she's a Jötun, and usually it's assumed that she was the Jötun Jörd, the personification of the earth in Norse mythology, who then became one of Odin's baby mamas. Thor's story only really starts once he gets his hammer Mjolnir, which he got from his uncle Loki. Yes, Uncle Loki, because in Norse mythology, Loki and Thor are not brothers. One day, the mature older Uncle Loki decided to play a prank on his nephew Thor by cutting his wife Siv's hair off. Why? It's just typical Loki stuff. So after that was done, Thor was mad, and when thick mythological red-haired Thor gets mad, somebody usually dies. So Loki had to appease his nephew, and in order to appease an angry strongman with murderous intentions, it's apparently a good idea to craft the strongest weapon in the universe for him, Mjolnir. In order to do that, Loki resorted to more trickery and lies, because he clearly did not learn his lesson at all. Loki challenged the dwarven blacksmiths by basically saying, I bet you can't craft the greatest weapon ever, which triggered them because the dwarves were known to be the greatest blacksmiths in the universe. So I'd like to think that they were literally just like, hold my beer, you know, because they're dwarves, and dwarves always drink beer, right? So no, wait, in the ancient North, they would have said, hold my meat. No, meat with a D. Not hold my meat. I'm too childish for these. And because Loki is Loki, he wagered his life on the bet for no reason other than to spice things up. And the dwarves were crafting Mjolnir, and it actually started to look like the best weapon ever. So Loki sabotaged their work by transforming into a fly and bit one of the blacksmith dwarves in the eye so that Mjolnir wouldn't actually become the greatest weapon ever. Loki wins the bet and saves his life, and that's why now the handle of Mjolnir is so short compared to its head. A problem that's not funny at all because it's something that many men face these days, and no, those pills that are advertised, they will not help you. Trust me. I'm not talking from experience. If there was ever any doubt left, Mjolnir definitely cemented Thor as the strongest of all the Norse gods. And on top of that, Thor also had a magical belt and gloves that are often not mentioned. The gloves, Jerngriper, were necessary to handle Mjolnir's force, along with the belt that just simply and literally doubled Thor's power and has the most difficult name ever.
Thor's magic belt.
By the way, in Norse mythology, wielding Mjolnir has nothing to do with being worthy, just Thor being the only god strong enough to lift it. So one day, the gods' giant enemies, the Jötnar, who are also insanely strong, decided to steal Mjolnir and hid it from Thor and demanded the goddess of beauty and love in exchange, Freya. Obviously a ridiculous request, so Thor said, okay, deal, and went to get Freya. But Freya said, hell no, are you kidding me, Thor? What the Also, Freya was slightly offended that Thor would just trade her for his hammer. So then Heimdall, the Watcher, had a genius idea. Let's dress this massive, brawny, bearded, red-haired god of thunder up in a wedding gown and present him to the giants as Freya. And they actually did that, they tried that, and it worked, because I don't know why that worked. Anyway, fast forward to the wedding, and the Jötnar didn't catch on to fake Freya Thor, even though fake Freya Thor ate a whole ox and drank tens of liters of beer in that gown. Like, this seriously sounds like a very bad 90s, early 2000s Adam Sandler, Eddie Murphy comedy or something, you know? The giants totally fell for it and were pleased with having conquered Freya. So they presented fake Freya with Mjolnir, and fake Freya was like, aha! I'm Thor, dun dun dun. And then he slaughtered everybody at that party. Like every single person, he slaughtered them with that hammer, smashed the skulls in and everything. Because that's what Thor was about. That's Thor in a nutshell, murdering his way out of every problem. And he did that until the very end. Because the Norse gods are not immortal, so there is an actual ending for Big Boy Sparkles in Norse mythology. Thor dies during Ragnarok at the hands of Loki's son, the world serpent Jormungandr. Thor clashed with Jormungandr many times throughout his adventures, and in this final epic battle that would have looked something like straight out of a kaiju movie, Thor defeated the giant serpent, but not without being wounded by its venomous bite. And after the battle, Thor was only able to take 9 more steps, one for each of the 9 realms, before succumbing to the poison and dying. But hey, at least we have Thursday now to remember him. You know, Thursday, Thor's Day, that's where we got that name from. Time for the extra notes. There's a reason that Thor had red hair. It was literally meant to represent his fiery temper, and it further underlines that mythological Thor was much more of a stereotypically manly, full-bellied brute without manners and a lot of anger management issues, rather than a manly man's crush like Chris Hemsworth.
I like this one.
Remember the 2 flying goats that drew Thor's chariot, Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder? Yeah, that's metal enough as it is, but also those goats are immortal, so Thor made it a habit to eat them every night since they are reborn the next morning. Like, I love mythological Thor. That's why it's so ridiculous that people were outraged about Fat Thor and God of War. I say good job, God of War people, like God of War creators, whatever your name is. Well done. That's much more accurate than every other depiction of Thor.